Amen. Good morning. Welcome to Bible study. Good to see you all back. This week we're continuing our series called Miracle People. We've just got one more, this lesson and one more after this. We'll be done and move on to another series. Pastor Lieben will be teaching. So we're talking about miracle people in this series and looking at when God used people in the triggering or the working of a miracle. We know God did lots of miracles without anyone involved. When he created the earth, he didn't ask anyone's opinion. He did that all by himself. But there are many times when God chooses to involve his people in his work. A miracle, as we've been saying since the beginning, it is an extraordinary and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and therefore is attributed to divine agency. In the Old Testament, the word miracle is a wonder or a sign that shows power. The New Testament word we get miracle from means power or mighty deeds. So we are going to now this morning talk about miracle provision. Miracle provision. And let's go ahead and get our text, Exodus 17, verses 3 through 6.
And the people thirsted there for water. And the people complained against Moses and said, "Why is it you have brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Go on before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel. Also take in your hand your rod with which you struck the river and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel.
Okay, miracle provision. First thing we need to talk about is the myth of scarcity. The myth of scarcity. And that phrase, actually, if you study economics, this phrase comes up quite often because this is something that anyone who works in the economic field and studying sociology related to economics, you deal with and you encounter. There is a mindset that is very common. This is true in many cultures, many different places in the world, but it's the idea that there is not enough in the world. There's not enough money, there's not enough food, there's not enough whatever it is. Many cultures and societies, it's essentially, you feel it like this. There are a lot of people, now don't raise your hands because we don't need to know who's guilty. But you can just work this out with God later. But there's a lot of people, in fact, most people, when someone else is blessed, it hurts you. Not in like you get sad and start crying way, but like, let's say you work at a job and your coworker gets a pay raise. Suddenly it's like, whoa. And of course there's a lot of emotions in that, but it's connected to the idea right here, the myth of scarcity. The idea that there's not enough. Well, if he got a raise, well, there goes all the money. There's not enough for me. Many cultures, many tribal cultures, this is very literal. That's why we have sangomas. Because if your brother the guy across the street just went and bought a brand new Mercedes, I have to curse him or I can't have a Mercedes because it's the idea of limited good. There's only so much to go around. It's like the whole world is a pie. And if the other guy, the other girl gets a bigger piece, that means there's less for you, right? One of the things that I don't understand is, when you go to restaurants, when they have appetizers, the number of items in the appetizer is never equal to the number of people. It doesn't matter. It's like if there's 5 of you, they'll bring 4 or 6, right? If there's 6 of you, they'll bring 5. And it's always, someone's got to be the one who takes the last one, right? But the problem is, a lot of times we view the whole world like that. If we were praying for a good job, she got a good job, oh no. That means there's one less good job in the world. There's now suddenly a job I can't get. A lot of traditional cultures, they are based on that ideology of limited supply. And there's only a certain amount of resources to go around, and so we actually are discouraged when other people are blessed. That actually hurts us. That's part of the reason why you see governments in the third world the way they are, right? You see in our government, as long as we have record, how does it work out, right? The people in power, they take all they can because they were poor before, so I'm going to take it all, and then we vote them out, and the new people that go in that promise change, what do? They take all they can because I'm never going to get another chance like this. I'm going to steal, rob, plunder. That is true all over the world. But it's this mindset, the myth of scarcity. There's not enough. So if there's a little bit in front of me, I have to take it all. Okay, let's bring it down a little closer to home. Because right now I'm talking, everyone's like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. What about when we have a fellowship? You might have noticed that when we have a fellowship, we don't let you get the food. Someone gives it to you. Because it doesn't matter. You could be the tiniest little granny in the whole church, but if you're the first one in line, you will feel, the plate is buckling. And then you get another plate, but then you put a plate on top of it. You got this one's my backup, and you're walking out, and there's no more food. You took enough food for 250 people on one plate. It's the myth of, you can see a mountain of food there, but this is an ideology that has woven itself into your very DNA. You can't imagine that there will be enough if you only take a little bit, right? This permeates all societies, all people. It's the myth of scarcity. And related to that, of course, a very similar idea. Some people say, well, there probably is enough resources, but they just weren't distributed properly. Pastor Heimberg, I don't believe that. I believe there's enough money in the world, but the problem is all the 1%ers have it. And so that's why I'm like this. Somehow the world is fatally flawed. God messed up, and he did not distribute resources equally. And so now I've got to do whatever I can on the side to get ahead. But listen, the myth of scarcity produces unhelpful things in us. Think about what is the result of this. You have jealousy and envy, right? We kind of briefly mentioned this, but this is literally feeling bad about other people's blessings. Genesis 26:14.
Isaac had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and a great number of servants, so the Philistines envied him.
They envied him because he had a lot. Listen, jealousy and envy only make sense if you believe the myth of scarcity, right? If someone walks into church today, the thing about Bible study is people are just filtering in, right? Someone walks in and you look over and they've got on a new suit. Wow. The heck? And you're bothered by that. It's because you believe the myth of scarcity. If they were blessed, I can't be blessed. If they got a promotion, I can't. The more money they have, the less I have. But this is what comes out of this, jealousy and envy. Listen, what jealousy and envy actually is you're upset because you think they got some of yours. You really think they stole from you. right? I've mentioned this before. Every church I've pastored, I've had people come and complain to me. There's someone in the church that's better off financially. They're upset about that. Really what they're saying is, you feel like you got robbed. How dare they be blessed? Why am I not? You feel like somehow they took it from you. Many people, even Christians, are genuinely offended by the blessing of other people. This is based on an incorrect worldview. Listen, other people's blessings should encourage you. This should be something, you should be happy about that. Yes, you got a promotion? That means I can get a promotion. You were praying for a job and you got one? That means God answers, He'll answer my prayer for a job. But see, many people, they don't feel that way. Then, of course, this can produce fear in you. Exodus 17, verse 3.
And the people thirsted there for water, and the people complained against Moses and said, "Why is it have you brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?"
Right? You got to think about this for a minute. The children of Israel lived in the desert for 40 years. If we could have an usher check, we've got wandering Sunday school children, so maybe if someone can just find out what's going on, time up, tase them, whatever needs to be done. The children of Israel lived, they went on to live in the desert for 40 years, and the whole time there was enough water for them. Are you with me so far? For 40 years, they had enough water in the desert. That means that water was available. You see how I'm doing that? That's just logical deduction. There was enough water for them for 40 years. But here, they're full of fear. Because if you believe the myth of scarcity, you will be filled with fear. We're going to die. There's not enough. I'm going to starve to death. It's never going to work. That comes from a wrong worldview. Their mindset, the myth of scarcity, created fear in them that there would never be enough. It's over. We're all dead. There are some people that they live in fear all their lives about money. Even when you've got it. You might have enough. You can pay your bills, and yet every day you are worried and full of fear about money. It's because you believe the myth of scarcity. Yeah, well, God blessed us last month, but I don't know about this month. God didn't quit. He's not on holiday. Listen, I know in December, all the churches in Eldos close, right? But God's still on the throne, okay? But see, that is a wrong worldview. And this is what produces fear in people. At a core level in your being, you really believe that there's just not enough. There's not enough to go around. This also produces unbelief or lack of faith. For many people, it's the inability to believe God for provision that hurts them. 2 Kings 7, verse 2.
So an officer whose hand the king leaned answered the men of God and said, "Look, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, could this thing be?" And he said, "In fact, you shall see it with your eyes, but you shall not eat of it."
Right? This was his unbelief that hurt him. You know what? When I say that having the wrong mindset creates unbelief, here's the problem. I'm talking to Christians. And a lot of Christians would say, of course I believe God. I didn't say you don't believe God. I didn't say you don't believe in God. But the problem is you might believe that God exists. You might even believe that God can bless, but you really don't believe that He will bless you now. It's theory to you. Yeah, okay, sure. I heard the testimony, so-and-so prayed, and they got a miracle job. Whatever. You just don't believe that He's going to do it for you. You really struggle with the idea that God would move in your financial circumstances in any miraculous way. This is often linked to the spirit of rejection. There are people that you think God's amazing, but you don't qualify for His goodness. Yeah, Pastor Heinberg, sure He listens to your prayers. Sure, he listens to their prayers. But you don't know, listen, where I come from, listen, I don't qualify for God's goodness. This might be personal rejection. It might be that in your family there's a spirit of rejection. It might be bigger than that. There are cultural spirits of rejection. When we lived in India, it became clear to me that nationally, as a whole, that the people in India suffer from a heavy spirit of rejection. And the spirit of rejection will cause you to not believe that God is willing to bless you. Then, of course, believing the myth of scarcity will lead to bad financial decisions. Listen, it is inevitable that this wrong idea about the world will work out in bad decisions. That's just the way it goes, right? In all kinds. You can make bad decisions about work. Proverbs 13:4.
The soul of lazy man desires and has nothing, but the soul of a diligent shall be made rich.
So what does God say? The difference between not having enough and being provided for. It's where you were born, right? No, it's not. That is not what the Bible says. It's if your parents taught you right, or if it's you had the right education, or nothing bad. That is not what it says. And listen, not only the Bible, but 6,000 years of human experience have made it very clear the difference between those who never have enough and those who are provided for is this: it is whether or not you will work. If you'll work, you'll be fine. And never has it happened that has been disproven. If you are willing to work. But here's the problem, and this isn't really in my notes, but let's just throw this out there. No charge on the house tonight. There are people like, Pastor, I'm willing to work, but you're not working. Yeah, well, because I applied for the job I wanted, but I didn't get it. Apply for the job you don't want. No, I wouldn't do that. Would you clean a house? No, I wouldn't do that. Well, that's the soul of a lazy man. You desire, but you won't do what's necessary. Now you know why it was free, because you wouldn't have paid for it anyway. Right? Bad financial decisions, bad decisions about work. Proverbs 20, verse 4.
The lazy man will not plow because of winter. He will beg during the harvest and have nothing.
They have excuses, but it's cold outside. I don't want to. It's too hard. I don't know, right? But then they're begging. I refuse to do what's necessary to take care of me or my family. Now you need to take care of me, right? Please help me. But see, that is, you misunderstand how the world works. Of course, we see hoarding. Fascinating when people have wrong ideas about finances. Some people, they begin to hoard things. Even ridiculous things. You ever meet someone, they're hoarding stuff that doesn't matter? Right? There's a family, it's funny, we were talking about it yesterday, a family we used to know. And listen, they had enough. It's not like they were hurting for money. And you have in your house, you've got cups and plates and dishes, and after you use them, you have to wash them. But every once in a while, like if you're feeling like you want to splurge, you'll buy some like paper plates. Why? Because I don't want to wash them. I want to eat and throw it away. I'm being lazy, but I've got an extra 200 rand. I'm going to do it. Right? This family, they had enough, and they would buy like paper plates or plastic forks, and then she would wash them. I know. Come on now. You ever been to the church fellowship and they hand you the styrofoam plate and it looks like it's I can see Mary in this. It's already been used before. Throw it away. We're hoarding. There's an even better story in the Bible, Exodus 16, verses 17 to 20.
Then the children of Israel did so and gathered some more, some less. So when they measured it, he who gathered much had nothing left over, and he who gathered little had no lack. Every man had gathered according to each one's need. And Moses said, let no one leave any of it until morning. Notwithstanding, they did not heed Moses, but some of them left part of it until morning. and it bred worms and stink.
I want you to think about the whole picture here. These people had been slaves their entire life, generations of slavery. In other words, generations of poverty. Now they come out, God is helping them, and God decides, I'm going to bless you. And he says, I am literally going to pour out blessing on you. They experience the blessing, and he says, just be careful, no hoarding. In other words, he's saying you need to be wise about your resources. I'll just kind of throw this in there as well. Even when God was pouring out free money, miracle manna, they had to go and gather it. God didn't do an EFT. They had to go get it. Okay, sorry, back to my lesson. But because of generations of poverty, as soon as there was blessing, what did they do? They start hoarding it, putting it in, even though God said don't, because it's going to breed worms and stink. So we'll just kind of file that one away. That'll be something you can chew on and digest for the next few weeks. But Christians do this. God blesses you finally. God's helping you. And suddenly now you're afraid. You're afraid to spend anything. You're afraid to give anything. You're afraid to be generous to people. Because now for the first time you've got blessing and you're afraid it'll never happen again. Because the myth of scarcity causes bad financial decisions. And then, of course, there's unwise spending. Some people, they spend without restraint because they assume they'll never get ahead. Right? There's people, listen, don't raise your hand again. Let's protect the guilty. You, in your mind, you think, I'm never going to be rich, so you don't save. Why should I save money? I'm never going to be wealthy, so I'm not even going to save. Well, that's what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. Of course you're never going to get ahead because you're not saving. But see, this is what happens. The myth of scarcity produces bad decisions. So let me flip the script now. Let's talk about the God of provision. The God of provision. I want to make a statement that you need to lock in your spirit. God created the world with more than enough of everything for everyone. That's how God created the world. Genesis 1, 27 and 28.
So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.
Now, this was the very beginning. There was literally one man and one woman. But what God said is, there's enough. You will have dominion, right? I preached last Sunday morning, referenced this scripture. The promise was, if you're in right relationship, you won't have to worry about material things. If you're right with God, you're going to have enough to eat, right? But then that changed, didn't it, right? For Adam and Eve, it was literally just fruits and vegetables. But then it changed. It became animals they needed to eat. But there was enough animals, wasn't there? Right? But then it changed, right? You fast forward in human history, we end up in the coal age, right? But there was enough coal, wasn't there? And we get to the fossil fuels, and there's still enough. And no matter how the world changes, no matter how society changes, no matter what we develop, there is always enough. In fact, there is such a massive abundance that it defies the imagination. Now, I know your school teacher told you we're running out of oil, but she lied to you. She lied to you. That is a convenient lie to fit political agendas. We're not running out of coal. We're not running out of oil. We're not running out of natural gas. You know, if we stick around for the next, 8 or 10 billion years and we still have the same technology, maybe. But hasn't history shown you, by the time we run out of oil, we won't need it anymore? Are you with me so far? God didn't create the world and be like, oh, there's so much more than enough. And then he's like, oh no, they invented cars. Oh, I forgot to put enough oil in the ground. God said, not to Adam, he said to mankind. He said, be fruitful, multiply, don't worry, there's enough. And there will always be enough. The earth is so rich and so full of abundance that so long as humans exist, we will never run out. Right? But of course, you hear the arguments that somehow we're depleting, right? We're going to run out. Let's talk for a minute about an element that goes by two names. Civilized people call it aluminum. But in the rest of the world, people call it aluminium. Which, it sounds like you were stuttering. I don't know. Why don't we do that to all of the minerals, right? Goldium, why don't we call it that? Silverium, but whatever, we'll talk about aluminum. I know this doesn't sound very exciting for a Bible study, but I want you to just bear with me for a minute. In the mid-1800s was really the first time that people were able to extract and purify aluminum. In those days, it was more valuable than gold. It was the most valuable mineral on the planet by a huge margin. Napoleon III, in his court, his most important guests were given aluminum cutlery, while servants were given the silver and gold. That's how valuable it was. But think for a moment, why are things valuable? What makes things valuable? Just anyone, any ideas? Michael? Scarcity. The problem with that is that aluminum is the third most common element on planet Earth. But here's the dilemma. We didn't know how to extract aluminum. The only processes were extremely slow, extremely time-consuming, and so it was so scarce. In those days, the fashionable people wore aluminum jewelry. Because aluminum, you can polish it to a high shine. Literally kings and queens. Like when you saw bling in the 1800s, it was aluminum. Right, which I think is hilarious. If you go to some of these markets, we went to one market, I think near Rosebank. It's one of these where it's all different local craftsmen. There's people, they take Coke cans and refashion it into artwork, right? And then sell it for stupid prices. So listen, this is way beyond that. Aluminum was more valuable than gold, platinum, any other mineral on the world. But today, it is the cheapest extracted metal on the planet, right? We have aluminum cups. We throw them away. In fact, right, this is like the bottom of the income chain. You walk on the streets to find discarded aluminum to recycle for a few rand. That's how cheap it is. The difference is that there was a man who discovered an easy way to release aluminum from the surrounding minerals. And so, the point is, we couldn't access it, so it had this extraordinary inflated value, but now it has literally changed the world. In every kind of technology, airplanes have aluminum skin, right? Everything. But the breakthrough, when it came, it changed the world. The reason for sharing that story, that's just one very simple technological story. The point is, what other breakthroughs are we waiting for? People are like, oh, there's not enough. Trust me, there's enough. Right here in South Africa, it's funny. When people visit South Africa, they're like, wow, you guys are really into renewable energy. What do you mean? I see solar panels everywhere. Oh, no. We're not into renewables, right? You just can't trust the government, right? That's all it is. The best solar panels in the world today, and by that I mean not the ones that we put on our houses, the very best. At the very best, right now, they're extracting about 18 or 19% of the available power from sunlight, right? Someone's going to figure it out. There's going to be some nerdy guy, with glasses on the end of his nose and a microscope and a white lab coat, and he's going to go, aha, if we just did this, we'd get 100%. And suddenly, we wouldn't even need Eskom. You put up one little solar panel and we are set forever. And it's going to happen one day. And the point is, the world is full of those things. Right? When Adam and Eve were walking around, plucking forbidden fruits, they weren't even thinking about aluminum. They didn't even know what coal was. If you talk to them about oil, maybe they would think you're talking about olive oil. The thing is, the earth, there's enough. And when you think about the earth that God created with its absolutely overwhelming abundance, we're not talking about material things. We're talking about who God is. He's not just the God that created abundance. He is the God of abundance. There are untold resources in the world that God has created. We are never going to run out. That's the point. So, what that means then is that we need to consider God's character. And when we do that, we come to the conclusion that God is just and God is willing to distribute resources to his people equitably. Now, we're going to stop right there for a moment and we're going to have a language lesson. Because I said equitably. I did not say equally. Are we clear? I know I've got a funny accent. The word equitable is not the word equal. They do not mean the same thing. They don't even mean similar things. And the problem is, in the world, we have the idea that equality is the best thing ever. But let's be honest, all right? Let me speak to the men for a minute. We talk about equality. Men that have children. Men that were there when your wife gave birth to your children. How much equality do you really want? Listen, I'm leaning towards equitable. Let's do equitable. I don't want equality. Right? What if the deal was when your wife is giving birth, the pain is split equally? Oh man, every man right now is like, oh. See, that is equality. Equality doesn't make sense in any realm of the world. If you go to work tomorrow, you say, I want equality. Why? Do you really want to be the guy with all the stress? Right? Because if you want the CEO's money, you're going to have to take his stress too. Do you want to have, right, the kidnap insurance? Because we're in South Africa, right? Listen, equality doesn't make sense in life. If we talk about things being equitable, now that starts to make a lot of sense. Things should be equitable. And the statement I made was that God is just and he is willing to distribute resources equitably. Matthew 25:15.
And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey.
He gave to each according to his own ability, and immediately he went on a journey. If you were to define this, the popular definition is equality means that an individual or a group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. But equity means, recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal or an equitable outcome. That's the point, is that the master, he distributed resources in a way that made sense. He said, you know what? You can handle 5. You can handle 1. You can handle 2. And there will be an equity in how these things are distributed. Now, yes, I know that sin exists in the world. And because of that, there are things that are out of balance, right? Our teachers should be paid more than our athletes. That's wrong. That's immoral. That's true in every country in the world, right? That's crazy. Right? That's because sin exists in the world. That doesn't change the fact that God is still just. So when we see imbalance in the world, number 1, we must understand and see this as the assault of hell and not the character of God. And number 2, this is why we need financial miracles. right? God's stated plan was that he would distribute equitably to everyone. But sin exists in the world. People are robbed, opportunities are taken, things don't work out the way they should. That is why we need miracles in the financial realm. But this brings us to a bigger picture that Christians have to think about. Some things that some Christians think are evil might actually be God's plan. I want you to just take a moment and just ponder this for a moment, right? There are things that we can't see, that we'll never see, but there are people that have grown wealthy in the world, and they may not even be Christians, but they've grown wealthy because they were wise investors or hard workers. They were shrewd in their business practices. But many of them invest massive amounts of money in helping people, right? Of course, it's not all of them, but there are some. There are very wealthy people that they give massive amounts of resources to combat diseases, right? Listen, I know the one guy that everyone in the modern world loves to hate is Bill Gates, right? Everyone thinks he's the Antichrist. I don't get it. He's just a computer nerd. He is like the nerdiest guy ever. In fact, it's so bad. In America, you guys know all the anti-vaxxer nonsense. That was a capital N on the nonsense. Just want to clarify. That's not in my lesson, but if you're anti-vaxxing is nonsense. Anyway, let's get back to the right. They were. You probably heard it here in America. The story was going around. No. Yeah, Bill Gates. They put a microchip in the vaccine. They put a microchip in it. Really? Listen, I have used Windows computers long enough to know that they crash about every third day, right? So when I got the vaccine, there was a guy I was talking to. He's like, "Oh, what did you ask?" "Oh, man, I was just, we went and got our vaccines." He literally took a step back like, "Whoa." And I was like, "Yeah, it's crazy. I keep getting messages from Bill Gates. I don't know what's going on." But there's another side of that. He has given billions of dollars to eradicating malaria. Now, there are Christians who are like, it's so evil that he's rich. You should distribute that money to all of us. What would you do about malaria? Oh, it got really quiet. There were no answers. Malaria? I'd be at Mr. Price. What are you talking about? Take-A-Lot has their biggest day ever, right? The point is, a lot of things that we see as imbalance might just be part of God's plan. There's a man, I don't even know who he is, he's been unnamed, but for years and years in a certain part of our fellowship, this man was not a Christian, he didn't go to any churches. He would show up at our Bible conferences on Thursday night, usually in the US and Europe, and put in massive amounts of money. For whatever reason, he just thought, I'm into this, I want to support it. I don't know how he got all his money, don't even know who he is. But apparently, God was using him for a reason. But see, that bothers a lot of Christians. How dare there be rich people when I live in Freedom Park? You know what? You're right. The world is funky. It's out of balance. But be very careful, because even in the Bible, God chose some people that their wealth was obscene compared to others. And God didn't view it as evil. There are people that they give and invest. And then let's bring it down. Let's be practical for a minute. In the text we just read, it says he gave them the different amounts of money according to their own ability. He says, you can handle this, right? That means that some people can't handle it. There are some people you're like, I just don't know why God won't give me this amount of money. There's a huge chance that it's because you can't handle it. Well, if I only had 100,000 rand, I could get ahead. But see, God knows. He knows what you would do with 100,000 rand. And he says, I have chosen to give you according to your own ability. So we have to be very careful that we don't call evil what might just be God helping you. You've no doubt read the news stories year after year. Every year we read the news in every country where there's a lottery, the people that win it, and the way their lives blow up. Right? Right? You don't find them, they win the lottery and then suddenly life is good. They're healthy now. They built a house for their Oma. They gave to the hospital. Now they're going to college to get a higher education. And no. You find them, 18 months later in a ditch. They smoked it all away. Their friends robbed them, bought 10 cars when you can only drive one at a time, and now they're broke again. Right? Isn't that the story all the time? Because, again, here's another freebie, right? Man, what a bargain of a Sunday. The kind of people that play the lottery are the kind of people that can't handle the money anyway. That's why they're playing the lottery. The kind of people that can handle money, they're not playing the lottery because they're smarter than that. So, but just like many of God's promises, provision is not automatic. How often in the scripture does God say if? If you, then I will. Genesis 4:7.
If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it.
Exodus 19:5.
If you will indeed obey my voice and I will keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people.
1 Kings 3:14.
So if you walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days.
Listen, you could spend a week studying every time in the Bible when God says if, then. God's promises of provision are not automatic. God absolutely desires to bless his people in a practical way, but more often than not, it's going to be connected to our decisions. That is inescapable. So that brings us to then triggering your miracle. Our scripture shows us that obedience is the first step in miracle provision. Exodus 17, verse 6.
Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock of Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel.
Here, God is going to... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And I will stand before you there on the rock of Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and the water will come out of it.
Oh, sorry, we're getting ahead of ourselves. My fault and the computer guy's fault. I'll take the blame this time, since I'm blaming them all the time. That was our next scripture. Anyway, God gave clear instructions here, and Moses followed them. He said, I want to help, but you're going to have to do something. This goes all the way back to the garden, as we discussed last week, but promised blessing and provision is always connected to actions of obedience. Listen, if you want to experience miracle provision, you're going to have to sort out the issue of obedience in your spirit. Will you obey God to the best of your ability in every financial decision? Right? If not, it's actually foolish to ask for miracle finances. You have to settle these things first. I will obey. This has to do, of course, with simply working. Your testimony while you're on your job. Your faithfulness in the tithe. Wise stewardship with what you keep. We could go on and on, but the point is obedience is the key. You need to make up your mind first that I will obey, and then we'll talk to God about a miracle. And over the course of time, you will see that obedience will prove to be the single most influential thing in your financial life, with no exception. You simply cannot overestimate the power of obeying God to trigger a miracle. And the crucial revelation is that you have to recognize God as the source. Go ahead and read Exodus 17:6.
I will stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it.
Listen, it's not a mistake that God chose a rock. He could have chose anything, right? Go and whisper at the lily and water, right? The rock. He is making a point. He's saying, Moses, the people need to see this. Their support comes from the rock. That is it. That is the source of supply. It's not a stream, not a tree, not your boss. Your supply comes from the rock. Listen, if you want to prosper long term, don't ever forget what the source of the supply is. It's God. It's God, the rock. Not your job, not your skills, not your wisdom. It's the rock. And God will provide a miracle that flows. This miracle didn't just touch one person, it touched all of them, right? The financial miracle that you can get from God has the ability to spread, can bless your family, can bless your church, bless your nation. But that is the power in the God we serve. All right, I want to stop there. We've got just a couple of minutes for questions. If you've got a question this morning, you lift your hand, a question or a comment. Lift your hand and hold it so I can see it. Any questions at all? Okay, Michael.
Pastor, I wonder if you could maybe help me to understand or maybe clarify just the significant mindset difference between hoarding and saving.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
yeah,
Hoarding is the spirit of fear. I am afraid to spend anything. Right? There are, and then of course that creates a snowball effect. There are people, they're like, I'm not going to pay to get the oil changed on my car because I don't know, right? Then you don't get your oil changed, and then something breaks, right? But hoarding is the idea, it's fear. I won't buy, right? Kids need new shoes, no, I'll tape them up. I've got money for new shoes, but no, I'm just gonna put tape on them. And so it's fear that causes us to hold everything, and unwillingness to spend. Yeah, good question. Very good. What else? Any other questions or comments this morning? Yes, Levin?
So, Pastor, the other day you spoke about obstacles and you said our view of obstacles is our view of God.
Yes.
So, when it comes to scarcity, is this a miracle dimension that we have to contend to mentally, that this be broken, or something that you have to every day make a decision? I'm trusting and I'm believing God for this.
Did you say scarcity? Is that what you
Yeah.
said?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, because we live in a world where we're surrounded by a certain worldview, we must always be fighting against that. So we're fighting against the worldview, choosing to trust in God. And listen, it's not a magic trick. It's not like one day it just goes away. There's been many times in my life where things happen and the first response is, right? Fear, oh no. And then you go, no, I know God provided last time when this happened, He will provide this time. And so that's why we say faith is a choice. I am choosing to trust God in this situation. Very good. Does that help? Yeah, good question. Very good. What else? The Philway.
Pastor, you mentioned, you spoke about equality and you spoke about equity, which from what I got here says it recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the resource, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
So now it's actually a comment, it's not a question,
Okay.
if I may. The point I'm trying to make is that from what I've learned, when you take the equality, which is each individual or group of people given the same resources,
Right.
and then we recognize that they are the same, we have been given the same resources, we put them together, a lot of the times the miracle starts happening, and the provision and so on.
Meaning what?
Meaning, to put it in simpler terms, when as a church of Christ, we take what God has given to us individually and we work together, we make it work towards the same purpose, same goal, God then comes through, God shows himself, and it benefits.
So within limits, that is true in the work of God, right? When we partner together as the work of God and for the work of God, yes, absolutely. But I would be very careful. You should not apply that to the idea of commonality, or what we would say in America as welfare. We're all together, we should all share together and be together. I do not believe that that is the biblical principle. So, because the biblical principle is that God will provide, absolutely, for individuals. So you have to be very careful that you distinguish between the two of those. Yeah, very good. Craig. We've got 1 minute, 35 seconds.
Pastor, you mentioned each one is given according to their ability.
Yes,
So if you want to increase your ability,
yes.
what must you do?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So, of course, the context is finances, your ability to manage. You manage what you have with wisdom. So if you can be liberal and be a good steward, right? And a good steward means you're not running out all the time. God can absolutely increase you. And that's what we have to contend for, is that God will increase our ability, right? For me personally, there's been many seasons in my life when I have literally studied things like budgeting, right? Study, how do I, what is a wise savings plan? Because I want to be smarter. I want to increase my ability in these things so that God can give me more. Excellent question. All right, we're going to break. Service begins in about 5 minutes.